The heart of the first movie seems like it comes from a slobs versus snobs type story, right? Like Caddyshack or Animal House or Police Academy, and then even a decade after Ghostbusters, Billy Madison, Happy Gilmore, Mr. Deeds. But Ghostbusters in particular seems to emphasize the low professional status of the heroes more. They're like exterminators because they're going after gross creatures, but they don't kill most of their targets, so they're also kind of like dog catchers or animal control or trash collectors or janitors. But also, they ride around in a white car with some red markings on it and pretty much only blue lights, so it's like an ambulance. And the model of the car was historically used as an ambulance, technically a combination ambulance and hearse for small towns that couldn't have both. And on top of that, Egon, the scientist team member, basically diagnoses the victims, like Dana and Tully. So they're kind of like medical care workers, but they also work in a firehouse, so they're like firemen. But they also investigate crime scenes, although, in order to make all this plausible, they also use nuclear technology. The proton packs work like lassos, like the kind that a cowboy would use. But the proton packs are said to be particle accelerators in the dialogue, so it's like a sci fi version. Kind of like how a lightsaber is a more fantastical version of a sword that a samurai or a knight of the round table would use. This is another modernization for the pop culture pantheon. And the PKE meter that they use is like a Geiger counter. And the first ghost that they catch in the hotel, Slimer, is glowing green like he's radioactive material. So it's kind of like they're a nuclear waste disposal team. But also, the ghost trap has doors on it that are kind of like the doors you see on a bomber plane. So maybe you got a little bit of the World War II American military feeling going on. And that was mostly populated by average Joes too. Also, Ray is seen fixing the car up himself, so he's doing the job of a mechanic. And so, one way to expand on this to more jobs, you could have a welder's mask for a certain job, maybe to deal with a fiery demon, or maybe it's because they need to go inside of a giant ghost containment unit. So naturally, it would be too bright in there, because remember they say that you're not supposed to look directly into an open trap because it's glowing so brightly. And this could also make them seem like they're knights in shining armor, no longer just the all-American cowboy with a lasso, and instead going back to their roots in medieval Europe. Probably not Winston's roots, but he's the fourth wheel of the group anyway. And maybe you need an airlock suit to walk around in the containment unit. The Extreme Ghostbusters cartoon did something like this, so thank you to the creators of that for this. So then it's almost like they're astronauts. Or maybe it'd be like they're the oil drillers who become astronauts in the movie Armageddon, because they're so much better at oil drilling than the actual astronauts. That was fun, right? Lion tamers could have some elements that might be good to add, I feel like. Maybe the team needs to redirect some ghosts at some point instead of just catching them. Or maybe it's just because they can't catch the ghost because they're already inside the trap with the ghost, or inside the dimension with the ghost, and they can't kill it because it's immortal. But instead of a whip, maybe there's a mode on their proton packs where they can swing sparks at a ghost instead of grabbing them. And maybe instead of a chair, they have something that's just shaped like a chair, but it's a satellite dish with antennas instead of legs. And if there's any villainous human characters fighting ghosts, maybe they could use more inhumane tools like cattle prods. And I feel like modern day lassos would be an interesting thing to see in sci-fi form too. Like the stick could be basically the same, but then you would have electricity here instead of string. I think it could also be a good throwaway gag at some point, is if the team has to fight bug-sized demons, or rat-sized demons. That way, if we lean too much into other jobs, they still feel like exterminators, because we lean even harder into that job as well. So the Ghostbusters are just covered in swarms of these simple little pests. And these could be demons, so they could be like bats flying around with horns and tails. Maybe they're buzzing around like flies, and the Ghostbusters swat them dead, or they swat them in the air with the ghost trap itself. Maybe it's like a bug zapper to them. Or instead of being full-on demons, maybe they could be another variation like the dog monsters in the first movie, because I don't think those were literal demons. But maybe we go even simpler. Just a mouth, disembodied mouth, and maybe some scraggly hair. And maybe the team has to trudge through a river of them, up to their chest in little demon creatures swarming around like piranhas. Or maybe their skin is like the cab driver in the first film. In fact, maybe they're just skulls. Maybe they're ghosts like him, but without bodies. So all they can do is bite. So the Ghostbusters are covered in chomping skulls at the end, instead of marshmallow goo, or any other type of goo. And here's one minor dialogue thing that I thought of for enhancing the blue-collar feel. I feel like some character could come up to the Ghostbusters and say, "Hey, you missed a spot." And this could help emphasize their role as low-status sanitation guys. I can easily see the mayor saying that to them. And so then they have to remove ghosts from that area. For the most part, they're blue-collar guys, and their antagonists are all white-collar guys. They get fired from the university, and even before that, their lab at the university looks kind of like a storage room, and their first successful client, the fancy hotel, refuses to pay them until the team threatens to put the ghost back, and they have to fight with the EPA, and they only eventually win their right to operate by appealing to the mayor's desire to get votes from the general population, making it a victory for the common man, who we can then see in the streets cheering on the team just to drive the point home. And in the side plots, we have the most unprofessional team member, Venkman, who we just saw a close-up of in the previous slide, is competing for the lady client, Dana's, affection, or at least her attention, with this stiff violinist here. And there's one moment where the EPA guy orders an industrial worker in a hard hat from the electric company to shut off the ghost container in the Ghostbusters building, but he refuses because he's unfamiliar with the dangers involved. He's a good guy because he's still one of us, and so is the cop, too. Other white-collar stiffs are played for laughs by being weird, like Tully, the wacky neighbor accountant, or by being weirded out, like the library administrator, hotel patrons, the doorman, the oblivious restaurant patrons. But on the flip side, we also have Egon, who's like the Benedict Arnold of white-collar workers, the class traitor, because he's subservient to the blue-collars. And on top of that, Egon is more of a dweeb than the stiffs, so maybe he's still an underdog, despite being more white-collar than the other team members. He's also played for laughs to some extent too, by having weird hobbies and interests, similar to Tully the accountant as well, but less extreme. And he's a crackpot, because there's a line in the first scene where they mention that he once tried to drill a hole into his own head until Peter stopped him. And this is most likely a reference to the occult practice of trepanation, where you release evil spirits from your skull. So he's still a black sheep in the white-collar community of academia. And he gets rewarded for serving the team by the writers of the movie, because there's one woman throwing herself at him despite all that. Kind of like how Tully has it easy with a girl at the party, too. But unlike Tully, Egon doesn't get chased by a monster immediately after. And so, since Egon is the more white-collar guy of the group, it might be fun in the sequel to reverse the roles a bit and have him be put in a scenario where he has to pretend to be a construction worker in order to get away with being in a particular location and messing around with stuff he doesn't have clearance to mess around with. And it's worth noting that the official second film actually did do this for like a second or so of screen time, and audiences did seem to enjoy it for the little that they got. It probably could have lasted a bit longer, and we probably should have him do it to convince just an actual construction worker, at least at first, rather than trying to convince a police officer, and doing so successfully. I think that's a bit too implausible. Maybe Egon is then fully initiated into blue-collar culture by construction workers accepting him. Kind of like the time in Seinfeld when Kramer fixed a fax machine at an office when he's hanging out with Jerry, And so the people at the office think he works there, and they keep bustling him around to the next meeting and so on. And pretty soon he's on a first name basis with all his other co-workers. And then his normal friends see him like this, and they barely recognize him. By the way, Venkman's romance is basically the reverse of Egon's with Janine, or the reverse of Tully's with the blonde chick at the party. He's a smooth guy who ends up struggling to get a girl. But we'll cover that in more detail later, since it has a life of its own beyond just the slobs versus snobs premise. Also, I feel like the fact that Gozer is androgynous and fashionable too makes him contrast with our heroes more, since they're more traditionally male. So maybe this adds to the theme of them being blue-collar workers who do a job that is too physically demanding and gross and low-paying to have as many women and, just low-T men lining up to do it. Does that seem plausible? Am I onto something here? But maybe in the sequel we could switch it up by having a villain and or a minion of a villain be much older than our heroes. So he would have too much seniority to do their job. And or maybe the villains are from an older part of the world. They could be European. That way they could come across as even more sophisticated than our heroes. It's worth noting that the official sequel did this with both the villain and his minion. And it's worth noting that this aspect of the official sequel, the villain and his minion, are quite possibly the most positively reviewed aspects of it. But we'll see how those other elements come together later. And maybe the European villain or the European minion could be the German guest conductor that Dana mentions at this part in the first movie. Maybe he's angry because he's evil. Let me know if there's other variations we could have on this, by the way. A gender contrast in the first film, right? And an age contrast is what we suggested for the second film. And a nationality contrast too. So anything else for the third film? Just so we have an idea of where we're going. So does that seem like an accurate description of the main appeal of the story of the first film? Cultural underdogs, blue collar versus white, slobs versus snobs, all that stuff. Should we aim for that in the sequel as a sort of template? If not, please propose an alternative for us. I would be interested to hear what the other interpretations are that people want. But that concludes the heart section of the rewrite. If you want to follow this project as we develop it, if you want to see more, you might want to hit the like and subscribe buttons and maybe even the bell icon. The more people we have following it, the more feedback we can get to refine it.